Hello everyone. Welcome to Learner's Choice. You can learn everything here. We are starting tutorials on CSS.
The topics is CSS Introduction. Here we will cover all the topics from scratch with examples and tasks as well. What is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is used to style HTML elements by controlling their layout, colors, fonts, spacing, and much more. CSS separates content from presentation, allowing you to apply styles across multiple pages efficiently. Let's see the example. We need to declare CSS styles in the HTML page by using style tag. There are 3 ways we can declare styles. We can discuss those in future. Here we declared in head tag. It means we declared in internal CSS. Here is the example explanation. Background color sets the background color of the page. Color changes the text color of the heading. Font family defines the font for the paragraph text. Here is the task. Create a simple web page with a styled background color, heading, and paragraph using internal CSS inside a style tag.
The next topic is CSS selectors. Let's get started. What is CSS selectors? The CSS selectors are patterns used to select the elements you want to style. Common types of selectors include element selectors, class selectors, and ID selectors. Let's see the example here. We declared 3 types of selector here. The first we declared for the element level to p tag. Second declared .intro. It means the selector is class. And third #main heading. It means the selector is 8. The ID having more specification. Here is the example explanation. P selector is targets all p elements. Intro targets elements with the classes class intro. #main heading targets the element with ID main heading. Let's create a task based on the following information. Create a web page with 2 paragraphs. Apply a unique class to one and an ID to the other, and style them differently using CSS selectors.
The next topic is CSS inline, internal and external styles. Let's get started. What is CSS inline versus internal versus external CSS? Inline CSS, applied directly to an HTML element using the style attribute. Internal CSS, placed within a style tag inside the head. External CSS, defined in a separate .css file and linked to the HTML. Let's see the examples here. Inline CSS, we created paragraph tag, and we declared style attribute inside the paragraph tag. Internal CSS, we applied styles for the paragraph in the head section by using style tag. External CSS, we need to create a separate .css file and need to link the file into HTML file in the head section by using link tag. Let's create a task. Create a web page using all 3 types of CSS, inline, internal, and external. You can create a styles.css file for the external style. Colors in CSS supports various ways to specify colors, including named colors, hex codes, RGB, and HSL. Let's see the example. Apply different styles for the paragraph. Example, explanation. Color, red, applies a named color to the text in the paragraph. Background color, number 00FF00, uses a hex color code for the background of the text. Border, 2 pixels solid, RGB 00255, adds a blue border using RGB color. The task, create a web page with 3 paragraphs, each using a different color method, named color, hex color, and RGB. CSS fonts and text styling. What is CSS fonts and text styling? CSS provides properties to style fonts, including font family, font size, font style, font weight, and text align. Let's see the example. Apply different styles for the H1 tag. Example, explanation. Font family defines the font, falling back to sans serif if Arial is unavailable. Font size specifies the size of the font in pixels. Font style makes the text italic. Font weight makes the text bold. Text align, centers the text. Task, create a heading and style it with a custom font family, size, weight, and alignment. You can experiment with Google Fonts if you want. The next stop is CSS box model. What is CSS box model? The CSS box model refers to the design of elements as rectangular boxes, which consist of 4 areas. 1. Content, the actual content of the element. 2. Padding, space between the content and the border. 3. Border, a line around the padding, optional. 4. Margin, space outside the border. Apply different styles to the div element. Explanation. Width, the width of the content box. Padding, add space between the content and the border. Border, adds a solid black border around the element. Margin, add space outside the border. Let create a div box and apply the box model properties, padding, margin, border. Experiment with different values to see how they affect the layout. CSS backgrounds. What is CSS background? CSS allows you to set background colors, images, and gradients for elements. You can control the position, size, and repeat behavior of background images. Here is the example. Apply different styles to the body element and div element. Explanation. Background image. Sets an image as the background. Background size. Cover. Ensures the image covers the entire element. Background repeat. Prevents the image from repeating. Background position. Centers the background image. Let create a div with a background image that covers the entire element and doesn't repeat. CSS borders and shadows. What are CSS border and shadow? CSS allows you to define borders for elements and apply shadows to give a 3D effect. Examples for the border and shadow. Explanation. Border defines the width, style, and color of the border. Border radius rounds the corners of the element. Box shadow adds a shadow to the element with horizontal and vertical offsets, blur radius, and color. Create a div with rounded corners, a solid border, and a shadow effect. CSS layout, display and position. What is CSS layout, display and position? CSS provides different layout methods using properties like display and position. The most common values are display block. Elements take up the full width available, default 4. Display, inline. Elements take up only as much width as needed, default 4. Position, static. Normal document flow, default. Position, relative. Positioned relative to its normal position. Position, absolute. Positioned relative to its nearest positioned ancestor. Position, fixed. Positioned relative to the browser window. Let's see the example. Apply display and position values applied of the div element. Explanation. Position, relative, moves the element relative to its original position. Top and left, define how far to move the element. Create 2 div elements and experiment with the display and position properties to arrange them on the page. CSS Flexbox. What is CSS Flexbox? Flexbox is a CSS layout model that makes it easy to align and distribute elements within a container, even when their size is unknown or dynamic. See the example here. Explanation. Display, flex. Turns the container into a flexbox. Justify content, space around. Distributes the child elements with equal space around them. Align items, center. Centers the child elements vertically. Create a flexbox container with 3 child elements. Use different alignment options like justify content and align items. CSS Grid. What is CSS Grid? CSS Grid is a 2-dimensional layout system that allows you to create complex layouts with rows and columns. See the example here. Apply different styles for the grid container and grid item. Explanation. Display. Grid defines a grid layout. Grid template columns defines 3 columns, where the second column is twice as wide as the others. Grid gap adds space between grid items. Create a grid layout with at least 3 columns and adjust the size of each column using grid template columns. CSS pseudo-classes and pseudo-elements. Pseudo-classes used to define the special state of an element, e.g., :hover, :focus. Pseudo-elements used to style specific parts of an element, e.g., : before, : after. Let's see the examples for the pseudo-class and pseudo-element. Explanation. : hover : changes the color of a link when hovered over. First letter styles the first letter of a paragraph. Create a button that changes its background color on hover, and a paragraph where the first letter is styled differently. CSS transitions. CSS transitions allow you to change property values smoothly over a specified duration instead of instantly. Here is the example. Explanation. Transition specifies that the background color will change over 0.5 seconds when hovered. The background color transitions smoothly from light blue to green when the user hovers over the button. Create a button that smoothly changes its size and background color when hovered over. Animations. CSS animations allow you to create more complex visual effects by defining keyframes that describe how an element should change over time. Let's see the example. Explanation. I keyframes defines the different stages of the animation. Animation applies the animation to the div, which will change colors over 4 seconds in an infinite loop. Create a div that moves across the screen or changes color using CSS animations. CSS media queries. Media queries allow you to apply CSS rules based on the characteristics of the user's device, such as screen width. This is essential for responsive web design. Example for the media queries. Explanation. By using @media open parenthesis max width : 600 pixels close parenthesis, the font size will change to 12 pixels when the screen width is less than 600 pixels, ensuring that the text remains readable on smaller screens. Create a web page that adjusts its layout and font size for screens smaller than 600 pixels and larger screens differently. CSS variables, custom properties. CSS variables allow you to store values, like colors or sizes, that you can reuse throughout your CSS. This makes your code more maintainable. Let's see the example. Explanation. Main BG color defines a custom property, CSS variable, for the background color. var main BG color refers to the custom property value in the style rule. Create a task. Define a set of CSS variables for font sizes, colors, and margins, then use them throughout your web page for consistency. CSS Flexbox Advanced Concepts. Once you're comfortable with Flexbox basics, you can explore advanced Flexbox properties like flex grow, flex shrink, and align self to fine-tune how individual flex items behave. See the example. Explanation. Flex grow defines how much space a flex item should take up relative to other items. In this case, the second item grows twice as much as the others. Create a Flexbox container with several items. Experiment with flex grow, flex shrink, and align self to see how they behave. CSS Grid Advanced Concepts. Once you understand the basics of CSS Grid, you can explore more advanced grid properties like grid template areas and grid autoflow. See the example for the grid area. Explanation. Grid template areas defines a layout where header, menu, main, and footer sections are arranged in the grid. The elements are placed in the corresponding areas of the grid using grid area. Create a web page layout using CSS Grid with sections for a header, navigation menu, main content, and footer. CSS Responsive Images. Responsive images in CSS can be achieved using properties like max width to ensure that images adjust to the screen size while maintaining their aspect ratio. Example, explanation. Max width, 100%, ensures that the image never exceeds the width of its parent container. Height, auto, maintains the image's aspect ratio as it resizes. Task, add an image to your web page and make it responsive by ensuring it adjusts based on the screen size. CSS units, relative versus absolute. CSS uses both relative units, e.g., amrem %sign, and absolute units, e.g., pixels, centimeters, points, to define sizes. Relative units scale based on the context, while absolute units remain fixed. Example, explanation. 16 pixels defines a fixed font size. 2em sets the margin relative to the element's font size. Page where some elements use relative units, m, %sign, and others use absolute units, pixels, point. CSS z-index and stacking context. The z-index property controls the vertical stacking order of elements. Elements with a higher z-index appear above elements with a lower z-index. Example, explanation. The img element has a higher z-index than the div, so it appears above the div. Create two overlapping elements and adjust their stacking order using z-index. CSS clip and masking. CSS allows you to clip or mask elements, hiding parts of them for visual effects. The clip path property is commonly used for this purpose. Example, explanation. Clip path, circle, 50%. Clips the image into a circle, hiding the parts outside the circle. Create an image that is clipped into a circular or triangular shape using clip path. CSS performance optimization. As web pages grow in complexity, optimizing CSS for performance becomes important. This includes minimizing CSS files, avoiding excessive selectors, and using efficient layouts. Example, use CSS shorthand, e.g. margin, 10 pixels, 5 pixels, instead of specifying each side separately. Combine multiple CSS files into one for fewer HTTP requests. Take a web page you've created and optimize the CSS by using shorthand properties and removing any unused styles.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe the channel.